All right, great. So thanks so much for being here. Hopefully you're still wide awake. I know it's a little bit late in the afternoon for some of us, but I want to go ahead and jump right in. Title of my presentation, No One Goes to a Party Uninvited. I've literally said those words to people who've asked me why Black girls golf. So when Jay asked me to present, I was a little bit skeptical. I have to be honest because I'm not a revenue person. That's not my jam. I'm not a numbers person. I don't really think in straight lines like that. I'm more creative. So I was a little bit skeptical about it. But one thing I know for sure is that I'm an expert at being a Black woman who was new to golf and what that experience was like for me. And the other thing that I'll tell you is that I've learned a lot starting a business and being an entrepreneur and really bootstrapping my way to becoming credible and gaining the respect of my audience. So I'm going to share with you some of the things I've learned on the way. Some of the stuff are things I've experienced myself as a new golfer who didn't have a frame of reference for golf in her life in any way. So like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about why Black Girls Golf, why I created it, some of the unique value propositions that I learned along the way, and what that unique customer journey has been, and what that customer journey was like for me. And then I'm going to share with you a few things or a few insights about the community around you that you may not necessarily know. And hopefully that'll help you drive some new revenue with this new customer base. So diversity is being invited to the party, and inclusion is being asked to dance. Now, this is not a diversity training at all, but I wanted to include that quote because I think it's really important. The invitation for me never happened, and that's part of the reason why I started Black Girls Golf. When I got my first job, no one was telling me about golf and how integral that would be to creating and building relationships that would help me in my career. So, started corporate America with these aspirations of climbing the corporate ladder. And what I did was what everyone told me to do. I bought the power suit. I got there early. I stayed late. I really just put my head down and worked really hard. But one thing that wasn't happening for me was building the relationships that I knew would help me build a career. And I wasn't sure how to do that, and people weren't sharing that with me. One thing I did know, though, that when it was a nice day, people would come into my part of the building and ask guys who wants to go hit balls. And to be quite honest, I didn't even know what that meant. Go hit balls. I'm like, what are they doing? I knew for sure that it was something that was helping them become more familiar with each other outside of work, and that was a privilege I didn't have. People assumed I didn't play golf. They weren't wrong, but the assumption was there. And I knew that I needed to be there. So what happened for me was I went to Kmart, found a set of golf clubs in there, went to the very tiny sporting goods section at Kmart, bought a set of golf clubs, the bag, the clubs, they were all in the box together. And I didn't live too far from a golf course. So pulled up, walked into the pro shop and talked to the first person I saw and said, "Hey, I need help learning how to use these clubs I just bought." And, he was a good sport, came to my car and saw that I just had thrown the whole box in the trunk. And he's like, "You haven't even opened these." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm hoping somebody here will help me." And, now looking back, I recognize that was really bold. The women that I've met on my journey building Black Girls Golf have not done that. They weren't willing to do that. But what he did was help me sign up for a Get Golf Ready class. And I got to the class and still had to take the plastic off my clubs. The class was pretty large. There were about 10 to 15 people there. And I don't remember ever receiving any information outside of what I was learning on the driving range. And what was interesting to me about that was I didn't have any information, like nothing. I had no context for any of the things that the golf pro was telling us. So, the name of the course was Get Golf Ready. So I thought when I got done, I'd be ready. So the next time someone came into my part of the building and asked who wants to go hit balls, I boldly raised my hand. And it was by far, even still, 25 years later, the most embarrassing, intimidating experience I can recall in my life. I was swinging and missing. I realized after I had already gotten out there that I didn't know the rules, I didn't know the etiquette. There were just so many things I didn't understand and so many things I didn't know. And then when you add to that, that I was the only woman there, absolutely the only person of color, it was just a very intimidating experience for me. I was definitely a fish out of water. Luckily for me, though, one of the guys in the group recognized how uncomfortable I was, and the next day at work, he said, Tiffany, don't give up. You just got to take more lessons. You got to get better at it. But I swore to him I would never, ever visit a golf course again. But, that's my story. And I really wanted to make sure that other women didn't have that story. So I started Black Girls Golf. And one of the things I want to talk to you about is how my experience shaped how I built my organization. And maybe it can help you create a culture that would have helped me. So, one question I want to ask you is, if you were in charge of inviting people to a party and all those people ended up in the room, what would the room look like? Would I have been included? Would you have invited me? So, we're going to talk about the reality of what you're doing and the opportunity that you may be missing, because some of the reality of what you're doing doesn't resonate with me or women like me. And I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the marketing potential and the revenue lifting potential you may have in just changing a few of the things you're already doing. So, yep, this is me. This was me at Pebble Beach in 2015. I was invited by AT&T to participate in a promotion, and I was there for 4 days. They rolled out the red carpet for me. It was really an awesome experience. I really did have one of my worst experiences there too, and it reminded me how much work still has to be done in the golf industry for it to be more welcoming for people who look like me. But this was a great time. It was a great experience. This was really a springboard for other opportunities and promotional collaborations I was able to have, further along in my journey building Black Girls Golf. But this was one of my first, and I'm really happy about the time I spent at Pebble Beach. But again, it underscored how much work I still had to do in the industry. So, as I mentioned, I didn't have an invitation to play. I invited myself. There were no resources or information that I knew how to access, and that really made it more difficult for me. And I wasn't ready for the course, even though the name of the program, Get Golf Ready, to me indicated that I would be, and I was so far from being ready. And because I wasn't invited, there was no resources or information that I had access to, and I didn't feel course ready. I didn't have the confidence to go any further. I wasn't engaged. I was definitely not going back to the golf course. That was a vow I had made to myself that I would never do it again. But here I am so many years later with a golf business. And one of the things that I had to look at in my own experience and how I would build something different for other women was what was important to me. What was that unique value proposition that I think the course that introduced me to golf was missing? And here are the four key things that I think were missing. Um, how did I feel when I was there? Did I feel like I was considered? Did I get what I needed? And was it worth it for me? The money I spent on the program and buying new clubs and, golf shoes, was it worth it? And at that time, I didn't feel like it was. So, this is really the map that I used when I started building Black Girls Golf, because now, the courses that I go to are courses where I feel welcomed. And regardless of how poorly I played that round, people were friendly, the from the members to the staff. I feel good about being there. I feel good about, the relationships I'm building on that course. And did the marketing and programming reflect that I was considered? I can tell you that there was a time um, that the only Black person I remember seeing anywhere in the golf course or pro shop or dining facilities was Tiger Woods. And it wasn't until I started my business and started learning more about the industry that I understood there were so many more who came before him that I just had no clue about. The other thing was, ongoing opportunities for me to learn. All I knew about was the Get Golf Ready program. And there weren't any other programs that I was aware of that would help me on my individual golf journey or keep me coming to the golf course or help me with practice sessions. And then because none of that was happening for me, I just didn't feel like it was worth it. And there was no way for me to ease into the game. I had to either play 9 holes or 18, and there was no way that I felt ready for that. So again, I built something that I thought would speak to women who were in my same shoes because I was this person. And based on a 2017 study from Nielsen, they're really describing me. African American women are young, independent, and we really make up 52% of the total Black population. We're going to college in record numbers and we hold white collar jobs. I mean, this person was me. And a little bit more about me, a trendsetter. I was one of my first friends to ever start playing golf. And you better believe once I got into the game, I was bringing them along. I'm very loyal to the courses who treat me well. And if I had learned better on the course where I started, I probably would have kept playing there. Um, and I'm an early adopter of technology and not afraid to try new things. And from all the science and data that's out there about African American women and African American consumers, this really still holds true. But the other thing that I know, despite me being this person, there are still spaces where the value of that space is measured by my absence. Neighborhoods, schools, and sometimes golf courses. So when I built Black Girls Golf, it was really, really important for me to build a space where Black women don't feel that way. So on your golf course, whether it's your staff or your members, do you think that the value of that space is measured by the absence of Black and brown people and other people of color? It's just a question to ask. So because I know that sometimes those spaces don't always consider me and I don't always feel comfortable or welcome there, I know the invitation's not going to come. So when I built Black Girls Golf, I knew the invitation had to come first. And that's a little bit different from other industries where sometimes the interest is generated. And one thing that I have noticed about the golf industry is that it's one of the industries that expects people to come to them. And the women in my audience are not going to do what I did. They're not going to go grab a box of gloves and show up in the pro shop. And because the invitation's not going to come, because people assume she doesn't play, they're waiting on her to be interested and then show up. And it just doesn't happen that way. So Black Girls Golf is the invitation. It's one of the reasons why I named my business Black Girls Golf, because I knew that Black women needed to know that this was definitely a space that they would feel welcome and there would be other people who looked like them. So Black Girls Golf really is the invitation. And then I work really hard to generate the interest by dispelling all the myths that a lot of the women who come into our audience have, that golf is expensive, it's boring, it's for old white men. We hear that time and time again. And so to generate more interest, I do a lot of things to dispel those myths. I do a lot of heavy social media engagement. I'm always commenting. In fact, Black Girls Golf has a Facebook group that has over 2,000 members. There's 90% engagement in that group. Those women are celebrating milestones like buying their first set of clubs, signing up for their first lessons. They're also asking for recommendations. Where can I learn? Where can I play? Where can I shop? And through the engagement in that group, the interest becomes really, really strong. And that's where I'm educating them about here's what you'll need, here's what you'll wear, here's a great course that's welcoming and beginner and women friendly. And then after we've done all that, they're ready to make the investment. And one of the things that I've learned about my audience is that when it comes to something that they're interested in, something they feel confident and comfortable about, they really are not cost conscious. Believe me when I tell you this. I have hosted group clinics with women who've never touched a golf club before, but they show up with brand new clubs, brand new golf apparel, and they're ready to learn. So the investment, we can get to the investment, but it first has to come with the invitation. And, in the next few slides, we'll talk a little bit about what you can do in order to get to the point where you're ready to make the invitation. But there's some steps that have to come before that. And so when I say check your language, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And when I was a new golfer, I would see things like tournament and league and championship. There's no way I had the confidence to sign up for any of that stuff. But if there was more of a focus on player development, beginners, new golfers or newbie, using that kind of language. And then, a lot of the play on words like party, P-A-R-T-E-E instead of party. That stuff was lost on me. That it was really going over my head because I grew up in the inner city of Oakland, California. I ran track. Golf is just not in my frame of reference. So all the plays on words and, using terms like league and tournament, that just wasn't something I was going to do. Even as an intermediate golfer, I just wasn't comfortable and confident enough in my ability to participate in any of that stuff. And then I mentioned to you a little bit about building my business through social media. And social networking is all about the participation. I literally respond to every single question or comment in that Facebook group that, by the way, has 90% engagement. And the engagement happened because I'm participating. I may not have a whole lot to say, but I'm at least liking their comment or asking a question to, encourage them to talk more, to ask questions of the group, for the group to share tips. So it was all driven by me. And now I don't have to drive the conversation anymore. But it started with me getting in there and being really active. And I understand that, time is a huge factor, and social media will really suck the life out of you if you let it. But, using tools that will help you schedule the posts inside your groups and on your Facebook pages. I do use a lot of those tools to schedule my posts. But then when I see there's engagement, or that there isn't any engagement, I ask open-ended questions and maybe tag people with a question who I know will have a response. So make sure that when you have Facebook pages and you have Facebook groups, that you really are being actively engaged in those groups. Here's how you can participate in your community. Most of you are more than just a golf course. If you have event facilities or restaurants, dining areas, you really are more than just a golf course if you have those facilities. And what I'm going to talk to you about now are some of the groups that exist in your community that you may not be aware of. HBCU alumni groups. HBCU stands for Historically Black Colleges and Universities, of which I'm a proud alumna. Grambling State University in Grambling, Louisiana. Many of you may know Grambling because of its football team and their coach, Eddie Robinson. But HBCU alumni groups exist in almost every city in the U.S. They're really active. They have chapters and sub-chapters and committees that need meeting space and facilities to host events. Black Greek organizations, unlike the white fraternities and sororities that I'm familiar with, Black Greek organizations don't end after undergrad. It is a lifetime commitment. And these organizations also have chapters all over the country. Service organizations like the 100 Black Men and the National Association of Black Women and the Links and Jack and Jill of America. These are all service organizations that also need places to meet and host golf tournaments. National Association chapters. One example that comes to mind is the American Bar Association. There's also a National Bar Association. And typically, if the word national is in front of something that already existed, it's probably the Black version of that. And then there's also Black Chambers of Commerce, Hispanic and Latino chambers of commerce, and then also community centers where a lot of these other organizations are volunteering their time. So this is also an opportunity for you to show up, get to know people, understand who exists in your community from these organizations and these chapters, because you too can also be an asset to what they're doing in the community. And once you build those relationships, you may feel more comfortable extending the invitation to your facility. And then finally, I've repeated this, it all starts with the invitation. It was something that I never received. And so when I started Black Girls Golf, I wanted to make sure that I created a space where people knew they were invited. And so they were more willing to listen, more willing to ask questions, which makes it easier for me to help them. You're more than a golf course. You're part of the community. So be willing to be uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable my first time on the course. Sometimes I'm still uncomfortable when I go to a golf course. Like I said, there's still a lot of work to do. I still get hate mail. I still get questioned when I show up to certain places and certain golf facilities, and it is very uncomfortable. But if we're willing to be uncomfortable together, I think that we can build a bridge that grows the game, which ultimately will lift your revenue with this new audience. So thank you so much for inviting me to share my story and share Black Girls Golf with you. I'm happy to work with any of you or answer any of your questions at this time.
Well, hi, Tiffany. How are you this afternoon?
I'm great. How are you?
Great. How are things in Atlanta?
Finally, we got some nice weather, a little bit of a chill, so it's cooling off a bit, but it's a great day in Atlanta.
Well, great. Well, listen, we really appreciate you being with us this afternoon, and I found it really interesting. And as a golf professional myself, I can just think back on these things and things I could have done better. And so it's very enlightening. So I appreciate you sharing these with us because it's a subject that needs to be discussed. And so we've got some questions we're going to throw your way. Our goal here is to just put you completely on the spot. So are you ready for that?
No problem.
Okay. So here we go. So what are the biggest challenges you face when working with owners and operators?
So probably one of the biggest challenges I face are some of the assumptions people make before they get a chance to talk to me, just solely on the name of my organization. We don't exclude people based on race or ethnicity. We're willing to learn and practice and play with anyone, but my focus just happens to be African-American women because that's who I am. And when I approach golf professionals or golf course operators, it's really sometimes a very hostile situation because they're assuming a certain thing before they've had a chance to understand what I built and why I built it. One of the other challenges I face is getting them to be open-minded about trying new things. I think one of the things or some of the value I add to the industry is that I'm not an industry insider. Like my perspective is strictly from someone who's in the shoes of the people I'm serving now. And sometimes I want to try things that may not work. But just getting them to be willing to do things like maybe give us a 4-hole round because 9 holes is just too much for a beginner. And I've been in the industry long enough to understand that, yep, let us start on the back 9 so that we're not interrupting pace of play. You know, by the time people catch up to us, we're done. Um, Give us those holes in your on your tee sheet. Like, I understand how to help you, but you've got to be a little more open-minded for me to do so.
Excellent. Well, I really, your resource slide was really good as far as that kind of, top cover, because there's a lot more resources out there than just those, 6 or so you mentioned on that slide. And so we spoke before the presentation about, how building community is so critical to what you're doing. And so can you just tell us a little bit more about building community and how it's helping you grow your business, which of course is great for the game of golf. And, what are your thoughts on that?
So I basically bootstrapped Black Girls Golf. It was just an idea I had in my head, and I knew that I didn't want to go to the golf course alone. I did it, but I didn't like it. I didn't want to. So in order for me to develop an environment where women felt comfortable, I knew that it had to be a space where they felt comfortable bringing their friends to. So what I did was build community first. And if you look at Black Girls Golf kind of like a funnel, I'm catching them all up here, and then I'm funneling them where they need to go. So I'm catching seasoned golfers, I'm catching newbies, I'm catching women who are definitely not golf adjacent. So community was really important to help them build the confidence and the comfort level they need to even make it out to a 9-hole round.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you. So here's a good one. Do you see efforts in the golf industry that, give you any hope, or more importantly, actual signs of improvement when it comes to diversity in general? Good question.
So I have mentioned that there's still such a long way to go. But one of the things that I think is really helpful is when, organizations like NGCOA have conferences like this and invite me to be a speaker. People weren't as willing to do that 5 years ago or 8 years ago when I started Black Girls Golf. So I think, people are starting to be a little more open-minded and starting to understand that things like PGA Works, adding diversity to the conversation. I'm seeing more of that, and it definitely makes me more comfortable.
Okay, great. Here's one. Can you give owners and operators an example of a good invitation, personal email advertising that you've received?
I'm sorry, ask that question.
Yes. Can you give owners and operators an example of a good invitation, whether it's a personal invitation, an email, an advertising notice that you saw that you've received that really got your, was welcoming, what you're looking for?
Most of my invitations have been personal. I've not gotten many invitations via email or advertising. Now that I consider myself an industry professional, I look at advertising a little bit differently now, which is kind of weird. But most of my invitations have been personal, and that's because the relationship was built first. But I'm always willing to accept an invitation because I understand how important building relationships are. But most of my invitations have been just one-on-one, face-to-face.
Gotcha. Here's kind of another marketing related question. So you spoke about during the presentation about, images around the club or the marketing messages themselves that go out. So DeMar's, it seems like pretty low-hanging fruit to do those things and a great first step to the welcoming process. Why do you think it's taken so long, or why so many have not taken this step yet?
So I don't assume when I go into spaces that don't reflect me or where I don't feel like I've been considered, I don't assume that the people who created those spaces are racist. What I do assume is that it's just not something they thought about. It's easy for me to understand why, when I was working in corporate America, why I didn't get those invitations. People just didn't see Black women on golf courses, so they just assumed I didn't play. And so I can't assume that people who run and operate golf courses see very many of me. And so it's just not a consideration. I think that it has to be very deliberate, for people to consider things outside of their realm of influence. Like it just has to be something very deliberate. So even, if there's notes to your staff that just remind them, whoever's doing your marketing, to just remind them that we want to consider everyone, and if you have to call it out, call it out. We want to consider Black women. We want to consider Asian women, whatever it is, just call it out. And I think for the most part, it has to do with people not being willing to be uncomfortable. And so if you start with being willing to be uncomfortable and just call stuff out, just call it for what it is. I've had people who just don't even want to say the name of my company because it starts with Black. I'm Black. Say I'm Black. It's okay.
Gotcha. Well, here's a good one as well. Jason Pearsall, thanks for everything you're doing to grow the game. Do you consult with individual golf courses to help them diversify their base?
I'd be happy to start doing that. I have not done that thus far. I can go into a golf facility and immediately know if I've been considered or not. Sometimes it's just very simple things. When I started with that first quote, diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is asking me to dance, but I'll take that a step further. Did you include me in the invitation list? Let me help you put that together. Let me help you with the playlist. Let me help you with the selection of the decoration and the food. So you've got to be able to take it a step further. And I can always tell when a golf facility hasn't done that. So I'd be happy to, take a phone call, shoot me an email, and we can talk about how I might help you do better in that area.
Well, your phone is certainly going to ring for me again in the future. I can assure you that. So be careful what you ask for, right? Got another question here. How important is diversity in staffing at courses, not just the marketing effort for making golf less intimidating?
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for asking that question. I started a foundation a couple years ago because I understand that people can't be what they don't see. And in my experience and through my research in golf, little Black girls who look like me are not seeing themselves on the Golf Channel. They're just not. And I wanted to create a pipeline of more diverse candidates for careers in the golf industry. So I started a foundation. We work with younger girls because having people who look like you in spaces where you aspire to be is really, really important. And there's such an acute lack of African-American women working in the golf industry that I have been committing a lot of my time to working with organizations like AJGA, PGA of America, to help diversify those pipelines. So if you have an opportunity to reach out at HBCU career fairs, working with diverse staffing firms, I think that's really, really important.
Well, great. Well, Tiffany, we've kind of come to the end of our questions. We had some good ones there, so you evidently answered all of them. And so Taylor will come back on here pretty quickly, but we really appreciate you spending the afternoon with us today. And I thought it was a very interesting and informative presentation. Any parting words or last things you want to say? Then we're going to let Taylor take it away.
I just want to say thank you so much for having me. It was a little weird not being able to see who I was talking to, but hopefully I'll be able to connect with a lot of you in the future. So thanks so much.